Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who fled to the Maldives on Wednesday, was expected to fly to Singapore today amid that worsening crisis in Sri Lanka. He left Ranil Wickremesinghe as acting president, but that led to massive protests yesterday. A curfew was in place till 5 a.m. this morning. He has now, it seems, requested the Maldives government to arrange a private jet to fly him to Singapore, government sources in Maldives have said. Protesters have been defying tear gas and water cannon, as well as defying a state of emergency to enter the Prime Minister's office. They're saying he too must go. In the midst of all this, massive lines for fuel as the island nation continues to be on the brink. Shrija joining us with the latest from the ground. Shrija, tell us what's happening.
Well, the protests haven't simmered one bit. It is continuing. In fact, the crowd is also swelling at the Gotabaya. This is in Golfes Green, right adjacent to the old parliament. On one hand, of course, you have several of the citizens, in fact, protesting at GGG, which is the Gotabaya. On the other hand, you have several long queues outside petrol and diesel stations, fuel stations. And what's more important to understand here is on the political front, the update that we understand that Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, those sources suggest that yes, he has resigned, he has sent out a resignation, but it's not officially announced. Now that is still awaited, but for now we do understand that there has been a gazette which is issued to Mr. Prime Minister from Gotabaya saying that he's not really in a position to discharge his duties, exercise his duties, and hence Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe will be taking over as the acting president. So clearly that has not gone down well with not just citizens, but also especially the all-party leaders. Now, we understand after a cabinet meeting which was called by Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, a decision was taken that for an all-party government to be formed. So it's going to be very crucial because tomorrow, as per the schedule, we understand July the 13th, where Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to resign, and as per the schedule, 15th, where the parliament had to convene. But we understand now that Mr. Gotabaya has not officially resigned and that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe has taken over as the acting president. It's still in a state of limbo because we still don't have clarity on the political front, because you have the all-party leaders where they met and they arrived at a consensus asking the speaker to take over as the acting president. On the other hand, you have the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe conveying it to the speaker, saying that a new Prime Minister must be elected. This is where an all-party leaders should convene and should arrive at a consensus. That means an all-party government must be formed. Now that sends out a message to the citizens of Sri Lanka that Ranil Wickremesinghe will continue to be the acting president, which is not really going down well with its citizens. And that is one of the reasons why we understand, despite the heavy police deployment, Air Force and also the special task force right outside Ranil's office, we saw after 2.5 hours of tear gas shelling, the people, citizens of Sri Lanka managed to breach that heavily guarded location and also barge into the Ranil Wickremesinghe's office. Now that's what's happened. But what next is the question, because people have managed to barge into various political structures, this even after Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa did not step down. It is a strong message sent out by especially the citizens of Sri Lanka to those politicians that if you do not step down, we are going to conquer or capture your political structures. So far, we've seen that they have already captured the presidential palace. We have seen on the 9th of July how people, citizens of Sri Lanka, they all converged at Colombo. They managed to breach the security and storm into the presidential palace. Now they have taken over the temple trees as well, the old secretariat, and now again Ranil Wickremesinghe's office. What next is again the question, because there are several rumors that are doing the rounds. Probably in the next few hours or so, maybe in a day or so, if they do not see a change in Sri Lanka, if they do not hear that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe has stepped down from his post, they say that they are planning to even lay siege to the parliament. Now that is something we have to wait and watch out for, because that's going to go out of situation, out of control, total out of control. Because remember, laying siege to the parliament or probably capturing the parliament is really a very, very big, important thing, because that is something which right now Sri Lankan citizens, several of the groups who have been planning, but we have to wait and see how things pan out, because it is a very, very volatile situation.
Yes, indeed. That, of course, is as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. But, Shrija, what are we hearing about Gotabaya Rajapaksa's plans? There seemed to be some indication that he might be flying to Singapore, and yet that may not be his ultimate destination. Any further information on that, on his whereabouts?
Well, when Sri Lankans were awaiting to hear and watch the news in terms of Mr. Gotabaya has stepped down from his post of presidency on the 13th of July, we of course heard news that he's already, he already managed to fly out of Sri Lanka to Maldives along with his wife and 2 other bodyguards. In fact, this was facilitated by the Air Force itself, which they say they were obligated to do so. So he had landed in Maldives just yesterday, just about yesterday. There are efforts that are being made in terms of where he says he wants to fly out of Maldives to Singapore. But we understand from our sources, highly reliable sources from the Maldivian government, they go on to tell to NDTV that he had requested for a private jet so that he can fly out of Maldives along with his family members to Singapore. So clearly that's not happened yet. He is still in Maldives, continues to be in Maldives. And one of the reasons why he has requested for a private jet, what we understand is that he says fearing backlash from civilians, because there are high chances that there are various Sri Lankans who are there in Maldives as well. Now that could also erupt another protest or so. So fearing the backlash, he has now requested for a private jet to fly out to Singapore.